Hello and welcome to Awful Commentary. With me today, I've got the only person my mum has ever said, "So are you guys gay or what's going on?" Stephen Mears. Hello, Stephen.
Thank you. Call quality is so amazing that I missed half of that intro. But because I know you so well, I know that it was incredibly flattering and not a word of it was a lie. So,
It actually wasn't. It
wonderful.
was true. It was true and honest and very complimentary. So today we're going to sit down with our podcast and do a this year in Marvel review because it's basically finished now. Agents of Shield is still going on, but other than that, all of the Marvel properties are basically wrapped up for the year. So we're going to take a look back at what they've done movies wise, TV wise, and then also have a quick look at the Fox stuff that isn't technically Marvel but still Marvel properties. See what we thought, see how they compared to previous years, and stuff like that. How does that sound, Stephen?
It sounds pretty great, to be honest. I think it's been a reasonably decent year in the MCU so far compared to maybe not last year, but maybe some prior years. I think it's been pretty solid. So,
I think
what's
you're right. So yeah, let's get straight into it. With the first movie to come out this year on May the 6th, Captain America: Civil War. This is probably the most hotly anticipated property of the year. What did you think of it, Steve?
I was fully aboard the hype train for this movie coming off the back of The Winter Soldier, the greatest movie that is in the MCU. And I thought it was pretty decent. Pretty decent, Dominic. It was pretty good. Some great new characters introduced. Black Panther kind of maybe stole the show a little bit. He was pretty damn awesome. But yeah, a pretty great movie, I think. If not perfect, had its flaws, which I think have been well discussed by lots of other people, villains, etc., etc. But I think it was
Hmm.
pretty good, pretty damn good.
It did introduce the next phase of Marvel pretty damn well, actually, because obviously now we've entered Marvel's Phase Three, which is the wrapping up of all of the movies that we've seen so far. So by 2019, it'll have been what 11 years? I think 10, 11 years since Iron Man 1. So that's like a decade's worth of Marvel movies. And so yeah, Captain America was the beginning of this last phase leading up to Avengers 3.1, 3.2. And so yeah, we've got the new Spider-Man, who was actually a good Spider-Man. We've got Black Panther, who was, as you say, pretty much stole the show. And we start off Phase Three with a divided Avengers team.
I actually forgot that Spider Man was in it for a second there. When you mentioned it, I was like, oh yeah. Well, I was saying earlier, I was like, I'm sure there was someone else in this movie except for Black Panther that was new, and I was like, oh yeah, Spider Man. Kind of a big deal for that movie as well. But
Yeah, yeah. As characters go, introducing the new Spider-Man was a fairly big thing, but also tying up everything that we saw from Phase Two as well. I think that's what it did the best throughout the movie. Was it took everything that we've seen in previous Marvel films, combined it with what has to come in the future, and I mean, other than Guardians of the Galaxy, we pretty much got everybody that we're going to see in the next in Avengers 3 just there ready, and it set up a lot of things that aren't actually going to be touched upon until Avengers 3. So the idea of the divided Avengers team, we're not going to see that in Spider-Man. Well, we might see a bit of it in Spider-Man Homecoming, but that's probably mostly going to be like a Spider-Man origin story. We're not going to see that in Thor Ragnarok. We might see a bit of it in Black Panther, but surely it won't be the focus. So when Avengers Infinity War comes around on May the 4th, 2018, like that's the next time we're going to see all of these characters together on the screen again, which is strange because we've seen them all, we've seen at least one of them every year since about 2010. So we now have this 2 year gap where we're not going to see any of them, and that's a lot for Captain America: Civil War to do when you've got a gap of that amount of time.
yeah, it did. It had a pretty important job, as you said, closing one chapter and beginning the next. I think it did a pretty great job of like keeping all the good things about the existing characters and kind of it was almost like Avengers 3 in a way, like building on the characters that we saw there and kind of giving what giving everybody what they wanted from like Black Widow and more awesome Cap stuff, and to see Bucky again. But then yeah, like I think got people quite excited for the next phase in Black Panther and Spider-Man, because I mean, I wasn't a person who is that excited for another Spider-Man movie, given the like, well, almost two trilogies that we've had before. Like, it needed something pretty special to get me interested in Spider-Man again. And whilst I wouldn't say like I'm super hyped for Homecoming, I'm definitely interested in it, whereas before I like couldn't care at all. So I think Civil War did a pretty good job at preparing everybody for like the next chapter. And we've seen in some other movies that it's not always the easiest thing to do to try and set up a universe or kind of begin to pass the torch to something else. And so I guess Marvel should have a little pat on the back there for being able to kind of seamlessly introduce the new group and kind of, as you said, phase. Is it phase 3 now? Well, we'll be going into.
It is phase 3, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of new characters and the beginning of phase 3, we've just had Doctor Strange, who is a completely new character to a lot of people. I know a lot of people knew absolutely nothing about the character going into it. It's given us a whole new view upon the MCU that we never had before, whole new dimensions, a whole bunch of new characters, an element of time travel and time distortion. This is a whole bunch of things that we've never had before. It's been pretty well received by most people that I've talked to, but you only saw it last night, so you probably have the freshest memories of all.
It is. It's pretty fresh. It's like a freshly plucked vegetable, Dominic. It's fresh. Organically fresh. Free range fresh.
Free range strange.
Exactly. Free range strange. I'm loving it. I enjoyed that movie a lot, band. Dominic. It was very good. And I don't really know anything about Stephen Strange. And I'm also now incredibly happy that there are 2 Stevens in the MCU. Or a Steve and a Stephen.
There are more Steves than there are Dominics in the MCU, I can tell you that much.
Yeah, what did you think of it then, Dominic? As you were more of the comic expert than I enjoyed it as a kind of not knowing much person about Doctor Strange, apart from knowing that he was magic and I was going to get magic. As a comic nerd, so to speak, what were your thoughts on the movie in possibly relation to kind of his actual character, maybe some differences between some creative license for the MCU and just overall thoughts on the movie?
Okay, firstly, have you seen Kung Fu Panda?
I haven't seen the most recent Kung Fu Panda, no.
But have you seen the first one?
Maybe, but can't really remember it, and not sure if I've seen all of it.
Well, Doctor Strange is essentially Kung Fu Panda 1, but with Benedict Cumberbatch instead of Jack Black.
Okay.
And also, there are no pandas. But other than that, it's basically exactly the same film. The plot of Doctor Strange is simplistic to the point of fury. Visually, it's probably the most spectacular film that we've seen from Marvel. Like, I went to see it with a friend, and when we came out, she said, I didn't know where to look. There was too much going on. It was all a bit overwhelming. And I was like, yeah, that was what was so amazing about it. And she didn't enjoy it as much as I did, because I enjoyed the feeling of being completely like blown away by everything that was going on. But for her, she couldn't follow where the characters were because all the buildings were bleeding. So I can understand how people could have like different views on that, because there are elements of the astral plane and traveling between dimensions that are really like a drug trip. And that is like a direct reference back to the 1960s Doctor Strange comics, where Steve Ditko was drawing them. And Doctor Strange survived as a character because he was being read by basically university students and hippies who were smoking an awful lot of dope. Um, and this was a character that resonated with them because it was expressing surrealist ideas and exploring worlds and dimensions that nobody had ever even thought of before. And I feel like the movie transferred that pretty nicely. But plot wise, villain wise, again, it's another forgettable, pointless MCU villain. I can't even remember how to pronounce his name. The good guy in the upcoming Star Wars movie, the bad guy from Casino Royale. He's a great actor again, but in this one he was just utterly pointless. His character from the comics was in one issue of the comics in like the 60s or 70s, then was never used again. Like that's how throwaway he was in the comics. So yeah, I found that a little bit infuriating, but I was glad that Dormammu, the Dark Lord Dormammu, made his appearance.
I think I have kind of similar feelings to you, actually. Kind of, obviously, visually it was amazing, and I had a similar thing. Like, I asked my girlfriend what she thought, and she's like, "Oh, it made me feel a little bit dizzy, but I liked it." But again, like, I share the same thing as you. Is like that's the bit that I liked the most. But yeah, I was a little disappointing that the plot of the story was so kind of cookie cutter MCU, like so simplistic. But excuse me, I do wonder a little bit if they were trying to err on the side of caution, because how kind of, perhaps in quotes, far out they were going visually, that they were perhaps a little bit scared of also trying to make the plot too complicated as well. Like maybe if you have buildings melting, like if it was too Inception, maybe it would have been too steep of an entry point for people into the character. If you're kind of, it could scare people off, I guess. So like, whilst it is a shame, I think that the plot was a bit weak and was kind of just pretty generic. And like you said, the baddie was cool, but not really that interesting. I can kind of see why they did it.
Yeah, I can agree with that. They did some interesting twists with it as well, like introducing multiple Sanctum Sanctorums and making sure that at the end he wasn't the Sorcerer Supreme, which was kind of interesting because Doctor Strange has, at least in the comics, pretty much since issue 1, has always been the Sorcerer Supreme. So it was interesting that they decided not to promote him straight away at the end of the movie. It was an interesting twist on the Eye of Agamotto to make it the Time Gem. I felt like that's gonna cause some continuity issues because again, the Eye of Agamotto is like Doctor Strange's main talisman alongside the Cloak of Levitation. Like he's always wearing the Eye of Agamotto. And obviously, when Avengers 3 comes around, Thanos is gonna have to come rip that off that cloak. So I'm not sure quite how they're going to relate that. Should they do a Doctor Strange 2, which they probably are. This is the one thing about the movie that really bugged me. So you know, if I'm getting this passionate about it, it's going to be a big deal. I'm going to hark back to Captain America: The Winter Soldier back in 2014, and there is a moment when Captain America, Black Widow, and the Falcon kidnap Jasper Sitwell and chuck him on the roof, and Jasper Sitwell, because he's a coward, spills all of Hydra's evil plans to them, and he's like, Hydra are gonna kill everyone, and they're like, who's he gonna kill? And Jasper Sitwell's like, they're gonna kill Bruce Banner and Stephen Strange and the President and other people like that. And when he said Stephen Strange in Winter Soldier, I was like, oh my god, Doctor Strange is in this is amazing. But the problem is that was 2014, and the Doctor Strange movie seems to take place pretty much now in 2016, which means that initial mention of him, unless Hydra were going to kill a neurosurgeon, just cuz, that kind of lack of continuity really bugs me.
Yeah, I can. That is a bit weird. Yeah, unless I mean, I can't imagine they'd even try and like address that because there might be like a nitpicky thing. But like you said, for someone who pays attention to like the movies and like the reason they put that in was to appeal to fans like yourself who kind of already know of these characters, and then to then kind of also like throw it away or like muddy that continuity at the same time is like, well, could you not have I don't know, made it play within the continuity, or if not, like maybe don't name drop him, kind of thing.
Especially as they're playing around with elements of time as well, considering they have the time gem. I mean, like there are different explanations. You could say
Yeah,
that
true.
just there is no date on Doctor Strange. The only thing that dates it, the one thing that I noticed that actually sets it within the MCU is the thing that ruins that continuity, is when they pan across the New York City skyline and Avengers Tower is there. And when that happened, I was like, "Oh, awesome! It's Avengers Tower." And then I was like, but wait a minute, if Avengers Tower is there, then that means that the Avengers are formed, which puts this. And then it distracted me from the rest of the movie. Like, they put that there so that we would go, oh, look, it's the Avengers, oh, cool. But that actually took me out of the movie rather than invested me more in the universe. But that's, that's just a little thing for me. What did you think of the different supporting characters? So, when the movie first came out, and they were like, oh, Mordo's going to be in it. Like, for me as a comics fan, Baron Mordo is Doctor Strange's biggest villain, so that's kind of a big deal when Mordo's in there. But he's not actually that much of a villain in this one.
Yeah, I don't know anything about any other characters from the Doctor Strange comics. But just as on face value for the movie, like I thought they were decent. Like, the Ancient One was cool and his kind of little. You may have said it, but the Skype was cracking up. Like the guy that was helping train Stephen Strange as well, who like uh goes on, has a bit of a character arc throughout the movie, but like I didn't really think like he's important towards the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Trying not to say how to spoil it, but like I didn't really. You could have replaced him with somebody else. Basically, like he wasn't. I don't know. He didn't seem that special to the plot. Kind of like I felt like he could have told me it was anybody else, or somebody else could have done that job or that role, and it would have been fine. Like, but and his like Doctor Love friend, old relationship, former girlfriend or whatever was the
Yeah.
doctor that
Yeah.
helps him was like, okay, yeah, she was, I don't know, yeah, they're like nothing great. It was pretty much the Ancient One and Doctor Strange, and kind of everything else was just kind of to the side. Every other character, like the baddies, everybody else was didn't really feel that important and felt kind of a bit interchangeable, really.
Yeah. I think it was kind of an interesting experiment for a film because they did a very strange thing where it was almost like a sitcom. Whereas when you watch like How I Met Your Mother or Friends or whatever, they can only go to 3 or 4 different locations because they have to build the set for these locations. And building sets costs money, so they can't all have different houses because you can't afford to buy 5 houses. So some of the characters have to live together, so you only have to build 3 houses or whatever. Doctor Strange is basically the same as that. The only locations that we ever see within the movie are Doctor Strange's house, the hospital, the Sanctum Sanctorum in New York, and the place where he's trained in Nepal. Like, that's it. There's only 4 places in the entire movie. Like, there's the streets that they run around as well. Like, they have a little bit in Hong Kong, which doesn't look like Hong Kong. I know it is, but like they've tried to do it up to look more Hong Kong than it actually is. And so you have a bit where Doctor Strange goes into the hospital because he's injured, and then he runs away, and then someone else gets injured, and then he goes back to the hospital again, and he's in the hospital, he's out of the hospital, he's in the Sanctum Sanctorum, he leaves it, and he's back again, and he leaves it, and he's back again. And between that, you have like all these trippy, amazing, ridiculous scenes. But the pace of the film seems to slow down because he's going back and forth between the hospital, his house, the hospital, the Sanctum Sanctorum, the hospital, the pool, back to the hospital, back to the Sanctum Sanctorum. Like, it all takes place in exactly the same places, which is kind of bizarre for a film because normally you just keep moving forward constantly. Whereas Doctor Strange, maybe this is an element of, the trippy time manipulation thing where you keep going back to where you start or something like that. But he just seems to revisit the same places continuously throughout the film, which is a bit odd.
Yeah, there's not too much variety in everywhere he goes, and obviously they obviously, like, as what you were saying, they go to the same place in London as well, which is obviously probably for the, like, because of the fact they had to bend it and melt it and do all the visuals to it as well. But like you said, they reuse that same location several different times as well for the different mind-bendy things, which is obviously understandable from an effects standpoint. But like you're saying, like, it's a little bit strange to see it in the movie where they keep going back to these same places over and over again. But like, even though the plot is pretty simple, like, and maybe it's just because I've only just recently watched it, but if I had to go back and watch a Marvel movie, I think I would rather watch this than a lot of the others. Like,
yeah, I could agree with that.
Maybe it is just because of the visuals, and like, it is so different visually from the other films. Like, if you look a bit deeper, perhaps it is just the same, but at least, like, maybe superficially, it is better. Like, well, it is more different or more unique. So maybe, like, that's why it would probably be towards the top of my list of films to go back and rewatch. Although I didn't like all of the comedy elements in it, though. Like, one particular part where one of the interactions with the cape at the beginning,
okay,
which you can probably have a rough idea of when he's kind of first interacting with the cape and kind of trying to get some relationship or symbiosis with it to make it do what he wants. And there's like a very almost like Benny Hill kind of situation that happens, which I didn't really like too much. I thought it was a little bit too comical and like took away a little
bit too slapstick.
Yeah, just a little bit too slapstick, which I felt took away from the movie a little bit, or took me out of the movie. And it's like, oh, that just kind of put a foot the other side of the line for me. But kind of like the Wi-Fi joke, which I think was in one of the trailers, like, the rest of the comedy stuff or like the comic relief I enjoyed, but there was like that moment and maybe one others that kind of like were a little bit too Marvel ha 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 kind of thing, which I could have.
I agree with that.
Which I could have done without. Like,
the one bit that really annoyed me with the comedy, and I agree, I think actually the comedy in this is probably the worst element of it, was the bit with Wong, where Wong is working as the librarian, and he goes in and says, "Oh, what's your name?" "My name's Wong." "Just Wong, like Adele or whatever?" And it's like, and he keeps listing all of these, like Beyonce and all of these people who only have one name. And I was like, what is this? Like, what are you trying to do here? And then it pays off a little bit when they're back in the library and Wong's listening to Beyonce, and you're kind of like, oh, okay, fine, that's a bit of a funny joke now, because we thought the Wong didn't understand because, he's like an Asian monk living in a temple, he's removed, so he doesn't understand what he's talking about, but he does. But the jokes just fell so flat. And I don't know if it's like a Benedict Cumberbatch thing, because he's pretty good in the film. Like, his American accent didn't annoy me as much as I thought it would. Maybe if it had been Robert Downey Jr. making those jokes, it would have like gone a bit better. Um, but it just seemed like whoever was writing the jokes tonally was out of touch with the rest of the film, and that was a bit odd. But what did you think, finally, for Doctor Strange, about the post-credit scene? Because there are two post-credit scenes in this one.
There are, and yeah, I completely agree with your other point about like the comedic moments as well. Like they just didn't. It's probably like the worst Marvel movie for comedy, like those comic moments. But the post-credit scene, I guess we shouldn't say what it is, or are we going to, or are we not going to?
Oh, we can say, if people are listening to this, we've already,
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about it.
Review.
So, indecisiveness for the last minute has probably been a suitable warning for people that I'm now going to say what happens.
Yeah, do it.
I really liked Thor being there, and I assume this means that Doctor Strange is going to be a sensible part in Ragnarok. Like, maybe a little bit more than a cameo. But I like that comedy. I enjoyed that at the end. And I
agree. That was the best comedy of the whole film.
In the whole film.
Was those two.
Easily. And I really like this kind of almost like laid back, nonchalant kind of Thor that like did you see the like Thor and his buddy roommate
his flatmate?
Yeah.
Like
that was hilarious. It was like that almost just buddy comedy, almost like sitcom kind of style where he's just like making light of everything. I don't know if I could do a whole movie like that. I think it would get old pretty quick. But to have like a sizable bit of that like attitude, I'd be totally down for a Thor movie that was more like that. And like I enjoyed the fact that this post-credit scene was kind of seemed to be in a similar vein to that little short that they did, where it's like Thor trying to live in the real world and he's got a little bed for Mjolnir and like the posters on the wall and everything, and he's like curing the ham in his room or something or whatever. Like a slightly less serious Thor. But yeah, I'm not sure how they'd make it work in the movie. But yeah, that was like probably one of the best scenes, definitely the best comedic moment in the entire movie. It was really good. And then for the post, that would be the mid-credit scene, I assume. Yeah. Then the post-credit scene, I guess that sets up the villain for future Doctor Strange movies, or
it just
whatever.
It just sets up the fact that Mordo was kind of on his side in this one, but he's going to be an antagonist in the next one. And it's kind of interesting because the problem I was sort of having in this film was, how's he going to be the Sorcerer Supreme when there are so many more better talented sorcerers than him? And it seems like he's basically going to become the Sorcerer Supreme because Mordo's going to kill everybody else, which isn't a bad way of promoting him up through the ranks, really, because that's what's going to have to happen. Like, so yeah, is kind of setting up the next Doctor Strange film, and showing this final twist of a guy who was heroic-ish in this one has now gone full bad guy, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about his character beforehand, so like when his character was introduced, I don't know from the comics if he's known as a bad guy, so I didn't have that thing of like, oh, I wonder how they're gonna turn him evil, or like I don't have any preconceived ideas about what his story should be. So I didn't know that he was gonna be, except for obviously when there is a point in the movie where it becomes obvious that he's gonna do what he's gonna do towards the end, and then they kind of confirm that in the post-credit scene. But like, it almost foreshadows itself in a way, because his character as well is talking about Mads Mikkelsen's character as, he was a great student of the arts, and then he was consumed by the darkness, and this is why we blah 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 blah. And then, like, at the end of the movie, the exact same thing has happened to him.
Oh, classic.
Classic.
Classic
he's
character
foresawn
arc.
his own demise or his own
He
turn to
sure
the
did.
dark side.
All right, well, let's move on from the MCU movies and go over to Agent Carter, which was the first TV property we got. We'll just do a quick bit on Agent Carter because it's been ages and it's now been
Yeah.
cancelled. So I know it is upsetting because Agent Carter, at least the first series, when it came out, we were like, this is the best thing that Marvel have done outside of the movies. And then like Daredevil and Jessica Jones came out, and we were like, okay, maybe not. But Agent Carter was like a pretty damn solid TV series. Like it wasn't groundbreaking particularly, but the characters in it were great and consistent as well, which is something that Agents of Shield doesn't necessarily have. But season 2 of Agent Carter moved from New York, where the tone and everything seemed to fit perfectly, to California because it was cheaper for them to film, which is, a little bit cheeky but understandable nonetheless. And it was the first introduction to kind of not necessarily to magic, but basically into these other dimensions and these otherworldly forces in that we didn't know existed before. Suddenly, Agent Carter introduces them, and then everything else has been able to build off of that. So, what did you think of the second series? Do you think that it deserves to have another one? I know they've said that it's cancelled. They're probably not going to do another one. But would you like to see one?
I would love to see another episode, another season of Agent Carter. Like you said, the characters in particular were great. They were so much better than like 90% of the characters that are in Agents of Shield. Like, it's a shame that I don't know if its ratings were lower because I know like it didn't have a prime time TV slot like Agents of Shield did, but like I feel it didn't quite get the dues it wanted. Like perhaps if they marketed it a bit more, I'm sure that it could have held the viewership that any other CW or like Agents of Shield could do, because like you said, the characters were so good. Like was it Hayley Atwell as like Peggy Carter? She was like
she is
perfect.
So good as Peggy Carter.
Then Jarvis was like awesome as well, and especially that second season was like particularly strong for him. I felt like in his character, what he goes through, like he goes from just being like a bit of a comic relief butler that helps him out in the first season to kind of almost one of the main guys of the whole thing. And like you said, I think it lays a really cool foundation for things like Agents of Shield, like, and it helps to give the MCU as a whole like some depth, because everything is set in the modern day now. Like, okay, we had the very first Captain America movie, which was set way back when, but since then it's like everything is the now, and you just have to kind of accept everything. Whereas like Agent Carter gave you that almost like an ongoing origin story to everything that's happening in the MCU now, but without it feeling like a typical boring origin story. Like, I think it gave a good, I don't know, extra level, just like a more depth to all of the series, because you can kind of, where something has come from, or even for other things in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., like, they can mention something in passing, and then you can think, oh yeah, that's perhaps, like, that's come from this that we saw in the 50s in Agent Carter. Like, I think it was a great show to be able to give the history of the universe, like filling in those gaps between Cap 1 and everything that is now. And I think it would give the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show like a lot more options as well, because if they needed to introduce something that was new and maybe different, instead of wasting a whole episode of a boring backstory to this thing, they could kind of maybe drop in a reference to Agent Carter, and we can be like, oh yes, I remember that. I kind of know what the repercussions of this could be. So I felt it was kind of the show gave a lot more to the MCU than perhaps it got credit for, and also that it was just a great show in itself as well. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It
it was
was.
a
It
great
was.
shame that it got cancelled. Like I don't know if I liked the was it California or LA? I can't remember. Like it took me a while to get into that after the first season, but still, like as a whole, it was still pretty damn great.
Yeah, I think the one problem with the series was that it didn't go anywhere. So the whole point of Agent Carter was that it was going to be Peggy Carter after World War II. Uh, the world's against her because she's a woman in a time where it's a man's world, and everything that she's done before is just kind of forgotten about because she was Captain America's dame, that kind of stuff. Um, but we always knew that her character would persevere through this and then would set up Shield and all of this kind of stuff. The problem was that after season one, we were like, okay, well now she's going to set up Shield, and she didn't. And then throughout season two, we're like, okay, well now she's going to set up Shield, and she didn't. And it feels like that the series could just keep prolonging this singular piece of character development that we're all thirsting for, as long as it needs to drag out ratings and money or whatever. But because it never went anywhere with that one thing that we were all waiting for, like viewership maybe dropped away, and we might not ever get to see that, which is a damn shame because I was really looking forward to that time where she gets to do that. And we've discussed this before, but my ideal Agent Carter season 3 would be like a 10 episodes or something with 2 episode story arcs taking place a decade after each other. So issues 1 and 2 taking place in the 50s, 3 and 4 taking place in the 60s, 5 and 6 in the 70s, whatever. Just like jumping through, and then like an interweaving storyline that follows her and haunts her through, to then tie in different stuff and experiment with different time periods, and allow you to introduce even elements of like things that the Winter Soldier is doing that we've like seen records of, but we've never actually like seen him do, like that kind of stuff. So there are elements that if they were to do one more series that they could bring into it. But, the character's not finished just because the series is cancelled, even though they killed her in Civil War. But other than that, I think there's more that Haley Atwell can bring to that character. So Agent Carter may be cancelled, but that sure as hell doesn't stop them referencing her on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. every other episode. You mentioned one to me earlier on. In the latest episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they referenced Peggy Carter. One that I saw a couple of days ago, they were having a tour around the Agents of their base, the S.H.I.E.L.D. base. And Agent Coulson was like, and this place was founded by Peggy Carter herself. So they love tying in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. 2016 has been a pretty up and down year for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I think. What have you thought of the end of the previous season and then the beginning of this one as well?
I can't remember too much about how Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. finished the previous season, to be perfectly honest. But I can remember my feelings, Dominic, and they weren't good. Because I was expecting this season to just be like a mope fest of them trying to find Daisy, which kinda has, but at the same time, it's been much better than I expected it to be. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has always seemed to start really well and finish quite well as well, and then it just turns into a soggy, gooey mess of like wet vegetable in like the middle of the season. So we're still yet to see if it manages to break that trend, but of what 5 or maybe 6 episodes we've had so far, I've been really enjoying it, and I think they've done Ghost Rider really well. Like, of all the characters they've introduced, some not so good and others, and especially when it comes to the effects as well. Like, that's could be quite a tricky character to do, especially being like quite effects heavy. And for a TV show, I think they've done really well, which is they haven't always done with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., because they try and go big quite often, but usually it kind of falls a bit short and things look a little
Yeah.
bit ropey and kind of the budget difference between a movie and TV obviously is clear, but I think what they've done with Ghost Rider has been really great. Not just visually, and like his inclusion in the series as well. Like, I'm actually really really enjoying Agents of Shield so far, and it's probably of all of the kind of comic book shows that are going on at the moment, I think I'm most invested in Agents of Shield at the moment. I
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I like what
I'd
they're
agree with
doing.
that. I think Agents of Shield, well, as you're saying with Ghost Rider, has done a really good job, especially when you compare that to how they did with all the Inhumans in like the previous series. Because by the end of the last season, I was so sick of the Inhumans. Like, I couldn't stand them anymore. Like, it just bored me beyond belief. You're right. What Agents of Shield does really well is set stuff up. And in all the different seasons, it's done this where they've set up antagonists or like enemies for them to go up against, and then when it actually happens, it's rubbish. And it's Agents of Shield is always anticlimactic, always, except for the first season. The first season is the complete opposite, where it starts really poorly, and you're like, oh god, this sucks. And then as the season goes on, it just gets better and better and better until it ends, and you're like, I can't wait for season two. Then season two sets everything up really well, and you're like, oh my god, this is going to be amazing. And then it falls flat. Then season three happens, and it sets everything up really great, and then it falls flat. It seems like with this one, I hesitate to say it, but they've set the characters up really nicely. They haven't given us a main antagonist yet, as far as I can tell. Although I haven't seen the latest episode, so maybe being one behind. But normally by now they'd be like, and this is the big bad guy. Because they're fighting against these ghost people that only Ghost Rider can kill, which is pretty cool because, you know, it does add that again that kind of Doctor Strange magical element to him. Because I love the where did you get your powers? Are you only human? No, I sold my soul to the devil. Okay, but seriously, how did you get your powers? No, I sold my soul to the devil. And I've really enjoyed that kind of dichotomy between them all. But yeah, as far as I can tell, I haven't noticed there being a big bad. It's not going to be these random ghost people. Like Ghost Rider will take care of those in a couple of episodes, I think. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they continue to interweave it, because they've done it kind of seamlessly so far, interweaving elements of Shield and the Inhumans and this new kind of magical element. But as you've seen one more episode, maybe you have a bit more of an idea of where they're going to go with it.
Well, no, I still kind of agree with you. I don't think they've really given away who the big baddie of the season is gonna be. Like, they've dropped hints about like the shady new Shield director or whatever, but like there's still no more hints, I don't think, in the latest episode to say that like he's gonna be the main bad guy. We're still pretty much on Ghost Rider's story at the moment. I wonder how long this is gonna go on for, because they kind of maybe an episode or two more, and they should have kind of probably one more episode, like wrapped up this initial mystery surrounding, or this initial case surrounding Ghost Rider and his family, and yeah, like his origin. So I guess that would be the big test. I mean, like, it's almost like an 8-part mini-series of like the Ghost Rider origin, basically. So it would be interesting. That would be the real test. Is like, where do they go from there? Like, how are they gonna? I guess they're gonna get him in part of the team, and like once he's there, what are they gonna go off and chase next, or like what are they gonna do? So, yeah, I'm kind of cautiously optimistic about that.
Me too.
But yeah, so far definitely so good. And like, I'm glad we don't have Bobby and Hunter anymore. And thank God that are they getting their own show still or not? But
No,
Jesus Christ, they better not.
They took them out of Agents of Shield to do the pilot for their own series, and then the pilot fell flat, and they agreed never to make it. Thank God. I hope they never come back.
Yeah, thank God for that.
Yeah, I think
they ruined last season.
They did, especially Hunter, who I can't stand at all. But I'm hoping that what they do this series is really deliver on the promise of last one, because at the end of the second season, I guess it was, or maybe the end of the third, I don't remember. One of them, they made that big thing of being with Daisy and going like, well, now we're going to go and get a whole bunch of Inhumans, and they're all going to join S.H.I.E.L.D., and you're going to have your own secret warriors. That was the big thing. They're going to be the secret warriors from the comics. This awesome superhero Black Ops team who go around and solve the stuff that regular agents can't, sort of thing. And they said that was going to happen. And then in the last season, they spent about 10 episodes trying to find Inhumans to join this team. And then they just killed them all in all of the episodes. They found someone to join the team, and then they died. And then they found someone else, and then they put them in prison. And it was useless. But it seems like now they're maybe settling down a little bit with that. And they've got Ghost Rider, and Yo-Yo seems to be a recurring character who, for some reason, is now completely fluent in English. Despite when we first saw her, she couldn't speak any English. Now she's like, in the matter
she's
of
just been
years,
reading those English
fluent.
textbooks really, really fast. That's what it is.
She has. To begin with, her and Mac couldn't even talk to each other in the same language. Like, they were kind of flirting with each other, like, not being able to talk. And now they're like, well, she's spouting idioms and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it seems like now they've kind of settled on that. I'm really, really hoping at the end of this series, we get an element with, or like, against the final villain, whoever it's going to be, we get to see Quake, Ghost Rider, Yo-Yo, Deathlock, and I don't know who else can come back, but I want somebody back in there. Or maybe just Robo Coulson. And, like, just to get that Secret Warriors team that they've been promising and that they've never delivered on. But speaking of superhero teams that are going to be delivered on, for sure, next year, 2017 gives us the Defenders. The beginning of this year, we had Daredevil Season 2. Another show that started very, very strongly, and then as the season went on, kind of lost its way a little bit, I felt. But what did you think of Daredevil Season 2?
I would pretty much have the same thoughts as you. Like, the first half of that Daredevil season was just like, oh my god, this is the Punisher's amazing.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of turned into a bit of a damp squid towards the end of it. Or like they just dropped the ball. I don't know what, but like the first 8-10 episodes were just like incredible. And then it just kind of went off the boil at the end, or like it peaked too soon, perhaps.
Yeah, it did.
I can't actually remember all of the end of Daredevil. I can remember Daredevil and Punisher talk, like a whole episode of them just talking on the rooftop, which was amazing.
That was amazing, yeah. Do you know, the Daredevil went downhill the minute the Punisher got out of prison. Because up until then, there was this big conspiracy about, about what happened to the Punisher's family, who was responsible for it. There was the rivalry between Daredevil and Punisher, and then he was trying to balance, doing ninja stuff with actually being a hero. And that was really great. Then the Punisher went into prison, and everything just got out of hand. And up until that point, the storyline, everyone's storylines was basically the same. It was Karen and Foggy are trying to sort out what's going on with Frank Castle. Matt is also trying to sort out what's going on with Frank Castle, but he's being distracted. Then the minute that Frank gets out of prison, it's Frank's storyline goes one way, Foggy's storyline goes another way, Matt goes one way, Elektra's goes another way, Karen's goes in, and it's just so much going on. and none of them are particularly strong storylines either. So when it all finishes, and they try and tie it up with a neat little bow, it just ends poorly, I thought.
Yeah, was the big ninja hole in the ground like how it ended?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, that was an awesome ending actually. When they went to there and they fought, they got into that building, and then there was a massive hole in the ground, and then nothing ever really happened with the massive hole in the ground.
Yeah, that's like the last thing I can really remember, to be honest. Like a black hole.
So yeah. So there's the big hole in going into the bottom of New York. The Punisher gets out of prison because Kingpin lets him out, and then he discovers that his old military captain, or his old commanding officer, who we'd only ever seen at his trial, was actually the big bad guy who was responsible for the death of his parents. The death of his wife and kids through some very tenuous links.
Yeah, that was
made
it. Yeah.
Absolutely no sense.
Yeah, that kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah, it did. Then Nobu, the ninja from season 1, it turned out that he was resurrected because he's part of the Hand, and that he wasn't dead at all. That was kind of interesting. But then also the Elektra was the Black Sky, which is this evil hand weapon that we don't fully understand what they're going to do, but I think they're basically there to resurrect this evil demon that the Hand worship. Then at the end of the season, Elektra dies, and Matt's like, "Oh, what did I do?" And then the very last thing we see is the Hand resurrecting Elektra, basically. So when we come back to see Daredevil again, maybe it'll be Defenders, maybe it'll just be Daredevil season 3. Elektra will be, probably the villain in the next piece. But and then Karen quits and becomes a reporter, and she has that really awful monologue in the last episode where it's like the news article that she's written about what it means to be a hero. That was not the article she was supposed to be writing. And then Matt reveals that he's Daredevil, and then that's the end of the series. But it's just a mess. It ends as an absolute mess. Maybe it sets up some interesting stuff for the Defenders or for season 3. Like there's a hint that maybe the Kingpin thinks there's something going on between Matt Murdock and Daredevil. But yeah, you're right. It starts so strongly with the introduction of the Punisher, and then it just kind of loses its legs as it goes. It's trying to do too much, and there's a really strong point to be made for Daredevil and for Luke Cage, especially, which we'll talk about in a minute, of being shortened from 13 episodes to just 8 episodes. And I know they've just announced this with the Defenders. The Defenders is not going to be 12 or 13 like the other Netflix series have been. It's only going to be 8 episodes, which I was quite disappointed about because, I wanted to see 13 episodes of awesome stuff. But in the Netflix series so far, in all of them consistently, we've seen 8 great episodes and then like 5 average episodes. So maybe it's for the best.
Yeah, I heard kind of a few people saying the same topic about Luke Cage as well, that kind of things could be benefited from condensing them down into 8 as opposed to 13. I always think like 8 seems too short, but then again, I would rather have 8 great episodes than like 13 average ones, or like or as in the case with Daredevil season 2 is like they have a strong idea of what to do for 8 episodes and then don't have as strong of an idea of what to do for the remaining 5 episodes. So
well, I think there's definitely something to be said about that for Luke Cage as well. So let's move on to Luke Cage, because the first 2 or 3 episodes of Luke Cage, I think, are probably my favorite couple of episodes of any of the Netflix series, actually. Like the introduction to his character, the pacing of it, like it's not like with Daredevil. Daredevil is infamous for being pretty slow, like having action at the beginning, action at the end, and just nothing in the middle. But with Luke Cage, the first couple of episodes, it's basically nothing. Like nothing happens until kind of like the end of episode 2 and then the end of episode 3. But it's brilliant. Like, the dialogue is great. The characters are set up ridiculously well. The world building is brilliant to see. They're just great. And then Luke Cage kind of has the opposite problem to the other Netflix series, which is when stuff starts to happen, the series gets worse, in my opinion. What did you think of Luke Cage when you watched it?
Yeah, I think I largely agree, and yeah, I don't quite fully understand why I enjoyed Luke Cage as much as I did, because like it does feel slow, like it does feel like it plods along sometimes, but it did genuinely feel like it had a lot of soul and a lot of heart to it, and like I was enjoying being in that world and in that environment, and like it didn't bother me at all that it was plodding and there wasn't much action, because I was kind of like really invested in that culture. Like I was really kind of taken there to the soul, and like you said, when the action did come along, it wasn't the best, or well, I don't even know if that's true. It's not. It's more of a Luke Cage action. Like, it's slower action. It's not as like it's not the same kind of action that you'd get in Daredevil or that you get in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, it's not fast moving. It's like it's slow, and it's him just being a wall, being an immovable object, and slowly walking through everybody. And there are a few times where, or like, well, I'm sure everybody's seen it, like when they launch a missile launcher off the roof, and like it's like, my god, like I was not I mean, how many times have we seen something like that in Flash or Arrow? But in this show, I was like, what? I was like, oh, he's got a rocket launcher, and we're probably gonna get him looking down the sight, and then that's gonna be the end of the episode. But no, we like see him fire it, and the whole buildings come down, and there's an explosion. And I'm like, I was not ready for that as a viewer, for what the show had built up my expectations to be before that, which was good, like in a way. But then, like you said, the final action scene was let down a little bit by the slower kind of plodding approach to the action, and like the last fight, or kind of the whole really final,
the big boss fight,
and the whole that his whole villain that I can't even remember his name. Oh my god, Diamondback. Yeah. I just didn't really connect with his character in the same way that you'd connected with everybody else. Like, because you're saying it does such a good job of building the world and like connecting all the characters together and kind of giving you an understanding of who they are and what their motivations are, that Diamondback kind of seems to come out of nowhere and doesn't quite have the depth of character or the weight that the other guys do. Like, it tries to set it up with like it's his half brother and the family feud, but like it still doesn't seem very meaty. Like, I would rather have seen, was it Cornell, the other guy, Cottonmouth is like the baddie for the first half of the season. I enjoyed him as the villain more than I did Diamondback.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the series, well, one thing it did really well was delivering the unexpected, but only to a certain extent. Like, I agree with the rocket launcher. When that happened, it was like, huh? It was so out of nowhere. It was so out of tone with the rest of the series that it worked. It worked amazingly, and that could either have gone two ways. It could have either have gone, oh my god, that's perfect, or what the hell did I just watch? That doesn't like that's not part of this series. But yeah, it did work. Diamondback was the worst villain throughout the whole of the show. And I think one of the reasons for that was that they tried to do this personal connection thing, like you're saying, um, because it compromised him as a villain by adding in this personal connection. Because through the whole thing, I was just thinking, but how did he become Diamondback?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he was. I don't remember them ever explaining it. They just went, oh, he used to live with Luke Cage. Now he's the biggest guns runner in New York somehow. But there was no explanation of how that happened or why it happened. And it was a very big leap to go from we used to be best friends and half brothers. Now you happen to be a super soldier living on the streets of Harlem, and I happen to be trying to sell guns like the biggest, most influential crime boss in New York. Like, I didn't buy it, and so that kind of compromised it. They should have just left out that whole personal connection thing and just had him basically as the crazy psycho crime boss guy who comes in to replace Cornell, I think. But yeah, those early villains were brilliant, and the music in the show was just like so good, and tying it into to Harlem and making it seem more realistic definitely paid off. Okay, so yeah, Luke Cage again makes me really excited for the Defenders and for Iron Fist. I say the other thing I just wanted to say, the action in Luke Cage was rubbish. All of the fight scenes, there was nothing to them. The best Luke Cage fight scene is in Jessica Jones, which is the first time we ever see him in the bar, when Jessica Jones runs to the bar to rescue Luke Cage, and he's already in the fight, and he's like, guys, come on, let's not do this because it's pointless. And they fight, and he's fluid and uses his strength, but he's like slow and methodical. Whereas in this one, he was just kind of pushing guys. There's a lot of backhand slaps and stuff, which I think he does in that first Jessica Jones fight scene as well. But in this one, it was pretty much him walking, and then he just slapped somebody. The action wasn't particularly well choreographed, and I don't mean like comparing that to say Daredevil, because Daredevil is obviously a completely different character. The way he fights is different, and it'll be different for Iron Fist as well. But the action scenes are supposed to be like the bit that we're holding on for. Like, come on, Luke Cage, like, let's see you do some awesome stuff. But when he comes to do the awesome stuff in Luke Cage, like, it doesn't hold up as being as awesome as it should be, I thought. But it makes me excited to see him interacting with those other characters, because you'll have him doing that slow, methodical fight stuff, whilst Daredevil and Iron Fist are doing some really awesome flippy stuff around behind him. Okay, so that's all of our stuff for Netflix as well. So next year we'll have Iron Fist first in March, I think, and then The Defenders later on. Going back to Luke Cage very quickly, the supporting characters were great, and they've already started filming The Defenders. They released some on-set photographs of Misty Knight against Jessica Jones this week.
Oh, beautiful.
There's some on-set photographs. Yeah, Misty Knight aiming a gun at Jessica Jones while Jess is like bleeding from her head. So that makes me really excited to see just those interactions between those characters, because they're both so strong, empowered women, like going off against each other. That I'm really looking forward to seeing all of those characters come together. So let's move away from the MCU. All of those, that's a lot of properties for Marvel to have brought out in 1 year.
Yeah.
How do you think, very quickly, how do you think this year, 2016, compared to previous ones for Marvel content? Like, this is probably the most that we've ever had. 4 TV series and 2 films. But quality-wise, do you think this year's been particularly good for Marvel ones, or just kind of average?
I think it's been pretty decent. Like, what did we say? Last year we had...
Last year was Avengers: Age of Ultron and
and
Ant-Man,
Ant-Man.
as well as Jessica Jones and the first season of Agent Carter, I suppose, as well as Agents of Shield. And stuff.
Yeah. I think cinematically, this year has been better. Like, I think I would take Civil War and Doctor Strange over that. And I think maybe even over most years, like we said, except for maybe, was it Winter Soldier and Guardians that both came out in the same year?
Yeah, so basically, since the Avengers in 2012, we've had 2 films every year. So in 2012, it was just the Avengers. 2013, we had Iron Man 3 and Thor: The Dark World. What a terrible year. How did we live through that year? I don't understand. Then 2014, we had Winter Soldier and Guardians, which is just ridiculous. Then we had, in 2015, Age of Ultron and Ant-Man. This year, we've had Civil War and Doctor Strange. Next year, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Spider-Man Homecoming, and Thor Ragnarok. So we stepped up to 3 movies a year.
But I would put this year up there with the movies. I think Guardians and obviously Winter Soldier, it's going to be hard to top that as a double whammy in the year. But as I said, I really enjoyed Doctor Strange, even though its story wasn't great. As I said to you, of all the movies that I think I would want to rewatch, kind of Guardians and Winter Soldier are probably like, and now Doctor Strange, like, those would be the top 3. In which order I would want to watch them, I don't know.
Okay.
But as I said, it's definitely up there. As far as TV stuff, excluding, let's say, Netflix-wise, I think it's not quite as good. Like, I don't think Luke Cage was as good as Jessica Jones the first time around, but that, again, like, I feel like I would want to watch Luke Cage again more than I would Jessica Jones, even though I'm not sure it's not a better show, but I think it's more enjoyable, or I enjoyed being in that world more. Maybe at least the first half of the season anyway. But, like, at the time, Jessica Jones was definitely more kind of awesome, and I was like, okay, I need to, like, binge watch all of these at the same time because I need to know where this is going, kind of thing, where Luke Cage wasn't quite like that, but I was still, like, I was enjoying the ride in a cool, like, soulful way. It's very cool. I enjoyed Luke Cage. But I don't think Daredevil season 2 wasn't as good as the first one, even though, like, the Punisher stuff was amazing. Like, the second half of the season did let it down a bit. And again, like, the Agent Carter thing, maybe it just wasn't quite as good as the first season. So I think, like, overall, Netflix-wise, last year was better. Like, the first season of everything was slightly better than the second season. But, like, I can't believe just going back to Luke Cage again, like, I'm really surprised I enjoyed it as much as I did. Because, like, super like Jessica Jones, but I was really skeptical about the character of Luke Cage. Like, I enjoyed him in Jessica Jones, but, like, I was in no way really hyped to watch him carry a show on his own. But it completely worked.
Yeah, he did a great job.
But I think definitely Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is better, or I'm enjoying it more than I did S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 3. And I don't know whether that's just because maybe the end of last season, or, like, what I thought this season was gonna be left a bad taste in my mouth, so, like, I'm feeling that the whole Season 3 was bad, but from what I've seen of season, what are we on, 4 now? I definitely think this is one of the stronger seasons that they've had so far, considering the position that they put themselves in. And I wanted to mention this quickly earlier, but I forgot. Like, in relation to... Because you mentioned about, with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that they were seemingly building towards Daisy building her team of Inhumans. Was that at the end of Season 2, or was that for Season 3?
I think it must have been the end of season 2.
Because my point was, at which point did the Inhumans movie get removed from the slate in relation to kind of when when her building the team seemed to kind of disappear from the show? Because do they coincide?
Well, because in the comics, the Secret Warriors aren't Inhumans at all. Basically, Nick Fury goes around and collects the children of supervillains. So every time a supervillain has had a kid and that kid gets superpowers, Nick Fury goes, right, you're coming with me, and then trains them to be badass agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Because being the kid of a criminal tends to lead towards crime, especially if your parent is a super criminal. And so the whole point of the Secret Warriors is that they're this team that are being directed towards good. And it's great. And so when that was announced for the series, it was like, this is going to be awesome. And then they all turned out to be Inhumans, and that was kind of bizarre. And then, yeah, as you say, the Inhumans kind of lost a bit of momentum when they decided to take the film away. And we were always kind of saying, weren't we, like, how are they going to tie up Inhumans and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and then tie that into the Inhumans movie when that movie is like 5 years away?
Yeah, that always seemed to be like the end goal, is that eventually like the big crossover for the show to the movies, or the big payoff would be like eventually these Inhumans for the show would perhaps kind of make up the Inhumans movie, or at least kind of Daisy Johnson from the show would play like a big role in the Inhumans movie. But then they kind of removed Inhumans from it was like 2019 originally, wasn't it? I thought.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was wondering if when that got removed, if that kind of coincided with the end of season 2, I can't remember the dates, if they kind of had to go, oh, okay, so we need to take season 3 in a different direction or something, which is why it, I don't know, ended up how it did. But I don't know, I'm not entirely sure how all the dates would match up on that. But
yeah, well, I'm kind of glad they did, because I feel like the Inhumans wasn't something that the series wanted to do. It was something that the board of directors were like, so there's no brand awareness for the Inhumans, because in the comics the Inhumans were released around the same time as the X-Men, but everybody knows the X-Men and virtually nobody knows the Inhumans, which is why they tried to do this big TV promotion, I guess, to raise awareness of them as characters, and why they did the same thing in the comics. And then they cancelled the movie, and it's like, well, we don't need to push this anymore, so we can start experimenting with other stuff, which is, why we now get Ghost Rider, and hopefully we'll get some other cool kind of dark magic-y stuff as we go along.
Yeah.
But yeah, a cancelled Inhumans is good for many reasons, because it means that Marvel Comics no longer has to push down the X-Men, which is what they were doing before, because there were so many similarities between the X-Men and the Inhumans. That in the comics, the X-Men were being killed off, and the Inhumans were replacing them, basically.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah. And so the X-Men movies were kind of dying off, because they're now lacking a bit of source material, because they're not making any more X-Men. Yeah. But yeah, we'll leave the MCU.
Go on.
So I was going to say we'll leave the MCU behind now.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you want to segue off into kind of the still Marvel but not part of the MCU Marvel movies? Marvel, say yeah, Marvel a few more times, Marvel.
Thankfully this year we didn't get Gambit, I think, as we were supposed to.
God damn it.
Yeah, but we did get Deadpool and X-Men Apocalypse. So we'll just do a very quick bit on Deadpool. How do you think Deadpool holds up amongst the other Marvel movies this year? Where would you rank it among the four? So we've got Civil War, Doctor Strange, Deadpool, and X-Men Apocalypse. Do you think it was your favourite? Do you think it was the worst? Where do you think it sits?
Well, it's definitely better than X-Men Apocalypse.
Well, yes.
It's kind of... It's such a different animal that it's kind of... All of the films, like, if you compare like Doctor Strange feels so different to the other Marvel movies, primarily just visually. Like, okay, if you look beneath the surface, it is the same old story. Civil War was obviously like your mainstay that is as MCU as you can get. But then Deadpool was so kind of left field and just almost like a parody of itself. Like there's no other kind of superhero movie quite like that. Like all three of them really have their own merits, and like if you say to me, oh, what do you want to watch, like Deadpool, Doctor Strange, or Civil War, I think 3 different times I would pick 3 different movies. I think they're all great. Like, I'm not sure. I think probably if you were trying to look at it, maybe I was gonna say Deadpool is a better movie than Doctor Strange.
Come on, we want conviction here, Stephen. Strong answers.
But the fence is so comfortable.
I would, if it was me, I would say that I've watched Deadpool the most out of all of them. I've seen it like 4 times. But I would rather see Civil War again than Deadpool. I would probably rather watch Doctor Strange again than Deadpool, maybe just because I've seen it so many times. I think Deadpool is the most enjoyable film this year, but I think Civil War was better, and I think Doctor Strange was more innovative.
Yeah.
So, like, I'd say it is now the highest grossing X-Men movie of all time. It's a higher grossing film than Days of Future Past, X-Men Apocalypse, all of the previous ones, and it was done on like a quarter of the budget.
Well, if you said to me, like, what is your favourite X-Men movie, then
X-Men property.
Yeah, or property, or Fox movie, or whatever, then it would easily be Deadpool. Like, I've never been a huge fan of any of the X-Men movies, really. And, like, the Wolverine movies have been decent, but I think, Deadpool is, like, a cut above all of those movies as far as I'm concerned. But I guess at the same time, like, it couldn't be as successful without those other movies to rip on. But yeah, like you said, it was done on a tiny budget, but is better in every way, and obviously the box office kind of reflected that. But yeah, it's definitely my favourite Fox X-Men verse movie, without a doubt.
Okay, and finally, what did you think of X-Men Apocalypse? I know we spoke about this in one of our podcasts before, but yeah, quick views on what you can at least remember from X-Men Apocalypse.
Pyramids, sand,
ultimate disappointment.
I enjoyed the opening 10 minutes. I remember that. There was pyramids, sand. I'm sure something else happened. Wait. I'm gonna wait. Wolverine went crazy, killed a bunch of people.
Yeah, see, while I'm waiting for you to remember,
that's it.
At the moment, on the TV, they're showing adverts for like the DVD or to like buy it online or whatever.
Is there an extended cut with deleted scenes, Dominic, that makes it less shit?
Probably, but I'd only download it illegally if there was. But the more I see the trailer that's trying to convince me to download it again, the less I want to watch it again. And I hadn't realised, because when I saw it, I was like, that was disappointing, but I didn't hate it. And the more I see clips of it, like, the more I'm like, God, that movie sucked. And I don't get that with Civil War. If I watch the Civil War trailer like 5 or 6 times, the more I'm like, oh my, I need to watch that again. But the more I see Apocalypse, the more I'm like, man, how did they mess that up? And I think it's got a lot to do with Bryan Singer, the director, because he directed X-Men 2. He didn't do X-Men 3 because he sold out to go and do Superman, which was rubbish. Then he was like, oh, I can't believe they ruined X-Men. So then he didn't do First Class, but he came back for Days of Future Past and Apocalypse and tried to like put his stamp back on the series. But he doesn't know the X-Men, and he's never known the X-Men. Like, X-Men 2 was a good film, but you can see in early interviews with Bryan Singer where he's like, well, we don't want them to have stupid yellow outfits because, that's so lame. But, like, that's the X-Men, man. Like, he doesn't get the characters, which is why he doesn't get Apocalypse, which is why the film doesn't work. I will watch it again at some point, but I'm not looking forward to it.
Yeah, I would not rush out and watch X-Men Apocalypse again either, or Days of Future Past. Yeah, it was pretty disappointing, and like a disappointing use of Oscar Isaacs as well.
Yeah, he deserves better, because when they cast him as Apocalypse, I was like, this is going to be the best thing ever. Oscar Isaacs is just incredible.
Yeah.
It's a shame. It's a shame that they messed that up.
The bits with Magneto's family were quite decent, though, if I seem to remember. Like,
yeah, but they only set that up so they could kill them.
Well, yeah, that was true.
Like,
and then it just ended up in fucking arcs of metal garbage everywhere, didn't it? And
it sure did. It's interesting, actually, because Apocalypse in the whole film only kills about 2 people. He kills people to demonstrate that he can kill people. But other than that, he just gets everyone else to do stuff for him. And it's kind of a bit lazy because, they make a big point of, it's just us against a god. And God just hangs around and doesn't do much. Maybe that's the story of gods in general. Yeah. Okay, so we'll round up this year in Marvel now. We could think about doing a this year in DC. That's going to be really great. Super positive. Really positive.
That's going to take 10 minutes. Yeah. Actually, let's just do it now. So, it was shit.
No. Come on, that's a whole other video that we can make out of this.
Alright.
So, next year for Marvel, we'll have, as you said before, we'll have, I assume, more Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Netflix-wise, we'll get Iron Fist and The Defenders. Old Man Logan, or just Logan, is going to be... Yeah. That looks pretty good. I'm excited for that. Then we get Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Spider-Man, Thor. It's going to be a big year.
It is. It's going to be a big year. I'm looking forward to that Logan movie as well. Like that trailer, I was like, ooh, you've got my attention, sir.
Yeah.
It looks good.
Yeah, I think it does look good, and I'll be interested to see how they use that to set up further X-Men movies. Okay, any more thoughts or comments on this year in Marvel, Stephen?
No, go and see Doctor Strange if you haven't, because it's great.
Yes, I would completely agree with that. Go and see Doctor Strange, and I didn't see it in 3D, and I regret it.
I did.
And I've never said that before.
IMAX, Dominic, and
was it as good as you would hope it would be in IMAX? Because normally I'm like, why did I pay extra money for this?
Well, to be honest,
but for Doctor Strange,
like, I don't know. The screen was nice and big. I'm not actually sure what the difference for IMAX is. It sounded cool, but there was nothing. That was, I guess, an interesting. They didn't really play much with the 3D elements. Did you see it in 3D or 2D?
2D.
Yeah, there wasn't. Which I guess they had so much going on screen, like with things folding in on themselves. If they tried to make anything pop out of the screen to you, almost like how they used to do when 3D films first started, where someone would flick something towards the camera or something garbage like that. Like, there was none of that I could remember. There was no real, like, big 3D-ness about the movie, which I guess was probably for the best. But yeah, I don't know. Don't know, okay. Dominic.
Well, thank you for that sterling recommendation.
I know. It's brilliant.
Thank you for joining us on Awful Commentary. We hope to see you again soon for a demolition of DC Comics year in film and television.
Demolition Comics. That's what DC stands for.